I want to talk about the U.S. Senate vote to end the government shutdown. The U.S. Senate held a vote yesterday in which the margins were divided 60 to 40, just enough to reopen the government. Now, this was passed by the Senate. It is yet to be passed by the House, but that is expected to be passed tomorrow. And so by the time that this segment is released on YouTube, most likely the government will have passed the legislation necessary to reopen it. Now, the deal that was agreed upon to reopen the government is not too different from what would be a traditional clean CR. There are some differences in comparison to a clean CR, which was what the Republicans were originally pushing. For example, any of the government firings that happened during the shutdown and layoffs are to be reversed. And even though the Trump government threatened to not give people back pay, they will be given back pay. Now, these are interesting victories because I would not call them victories. I would call them resetting the damage done by the battle. If the shutdown was done in order for Democrats to take a stand and show a spine over an issue that was important for Americans, to both bring attention to it and to possibly find success on it. If that was the purpose of the shutdown, and then they undo the damage done to people's paychecks by the shutdown, those who directly work, the federal workers, that isn't a victory insofar as that is just counteracting the damage that the battle itself did. So I would not call those victories insofar as they didn't get us to anywhere that we weren't before the shutdown. But they were victories in the idea that if we did not have them, obviously the situation would be worse. The only, I mean, really, the biggest discernible victory on the issue that everybody was paying attention to, which was the extension of the ACA tax credits, so we would stop people's premiums for increasing and to make sure that affordable health care is available to the most economically vulnerable. When this deal was made, they didn't agree to extend the ACA tax credits, even though that was the big thing that Chuck Schumer talked about. They even didn't agree to necessarily have a vote in both chambers. They agreed to have a vote in the Senate in January of next year. December, January of this year, next year. Now, to be clear, this is a demand that they were asking for, the Democrats, but the Democrats asked for more. They didn't just ask for a vote, they asked for a vote now, and they asked for the outcome to be that we extended the ACA tax credits. So we went from passing an ACA tax credit extension to we'll have a vote on it at a later date. And the biggest kicker is that the vote on it at a later date might not even matter, because even if they pass a majority in the Senate, as some Republicans might be nervous to vote against the ACA tax credit extension since it is popular with 75% of Americans, there's a decent chance it won't even be taken up in the House, making the entire deal kind of mute.
To bring back to the table, because that will actually solve the problem and not just subsidize insurance companies.
So you're not committing to bringing up a bill that deals with the Obamacare subsidies before they expire?
I'm not committing to it or not committing to it. What I'm saying is that we do a deliberative process. That's the way this always works, and we have to have time to do that, and we will in a bipartisan fashion.
So, to be clear, if he wanted to talk about, hey, we'll deliberate on exactly what a successful vote would look like, i.e., we vote to pass, not just we have a vote and it fails, i.e., getting to some compromise between Democrats and Republicans on health care so premiums do not skyrocket and a ton of people don't lose their health insurance, or finding some middle ground. But that's not what he expressed. He expressed that the idea of even having a vote to begin with is not necessarily locked in. That the entire victory becomes kind of moot if you don't have a vote in both houses, because you need a vote in both houses to actually extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. So I would say when it comes to the big issue that Democrats were talking about and getting a policy victory, extending those tax credits or getting any closer to extending those tax credits, that likely did not work. That likely did not succeed in the immediate term for this Congress. And it didn't succeed for a few reasons. The first reason that it did not succeed is that Democrats were not able to keep rank and file. Democrats were not able to keep all of the senators together. There were senators that broke with the Republicans to vote to bring the Senate bill through, to bring the continuing resolution through. And Chuck Schumer, who was a no vote, is possibly angry about it, but there's a decent chance, and this is what I believe, that he had a bunch of senators, all of which who are not running for re-election, outside of, I think John Fetterman might be running for re-election, had them vote for their government to reopen without any major concessions on healthcare, and then was able to maneuver himself into a no vote because he probably wants to stay in the Senate and does not want to be challenged by AOC. So an inability to keep the Democratic coalition together was one reason why we failed on getting any concession. Because if you wanted to get a concession, you have to be able to convince them that you keep the coalition together. But there was always a coalition or a collection of Democrats in the Senate who never really liked this idea, who thought it was a fool's errand, this idea of going out there and trying to get concessions in a shutdown, because the party that engages in the shutdown almost always loses. And so they, despite the fact that we performed so well in the special election, despite the fact that Donald Trump's polling is going down, despite the fact that we poll so well on the individual issue, they didn't think that this is something that parties traditionally win at. And as Donald Trump was threatening to get rid of the filibuster and was talking about that more and more, I think that spooked a lot of these senators who were never really that signed on to this shutdown being a avenue by which to get these types of concessions in the first place. They got spooked because Donald Trump already has barreled through enough guardrails. Do they want them to barrel through another guardrail for the Senate? A guardrail that also enhances the power of senators by giving them the 60 vote threshold necessary to block and not block legislation. As in, their vote becomes worth more if you need 60 of them instead of just a simple majority, because you need to build a higher Jenga pyramid of votes. So I think that the threat to the filibuster, their perspective that it just was not working, as well as, and I think this last one being the most valid of them all, the fact that the pressures on people were increasing. SNAP benefits, despite the decision by the courts that Donald Trump had to use the emergency funds that he himself acknowledged that were available to make sure that people continued to get food, continue to get those SNAP benefits. Despite that decision, eventually that money was going to run out. And at the same time that money was going to run out, federal workers were now dealing with losing their second paycheck. We had entered the longest shutdown in government history at over 40 days, and we were entering previously unknown territory. Air traffic controllers, more and more, were not showing up to work when we already had a shortage of air traffic controllers generally, but leading to a shortage of 3.5 thousand air traffic controllers across the country, leading to more dangerous scenarios at airports, headed straight into Thanksgiving, when people are going to be traveling quite a lot and nobody wants a disaster. Mind you, somebody could say that adds more political weight, but also you have to accept that political weight comes at an increased risk to those who do engage in flights. That increased political weight comes with increased pressures on those who are reliant on government programs in order to feed themselves. So that increased weight comes with a moral dilemma. And as somebody who, doesn't want those who are the most vulnerable amongst us to go hungry, but also doesn't want those who serve this country as a civil servant, as a federal worker, to have to go after paycheck after paycheck after paycheck without work at the same time that Donald Trump is threatening to get rid of back pay. I mean, that is one way to bleed federal workers, and that's also one way to disrespect the people who make, the world go round when it comes to our government. The federal employees, the rank and file, not those at the head of the pyramid, but those who built all of the foundation and everything up through the body, federal workers. And so as long as these Democrats thought that it wasn't going to work, that these pressures were building, and the institutional protection of the filibuster was under threat, and an effort that they weren't that encouraged about in the first place, these were all weak votes. These were all people who were probably willing to break earlier, but they needed permission to do so because the backlash would be so overwhelming. And that is why I think Chuck Schumer gave them the permission in order to break with the rank and file. And I think that Chuck Schumer, in doing so, at this point, has further damaged his image and made it more likely that he is going to face a Democratic primary challenge. Whether it will be from AOC for his Senate seat, I do not know. But AOC has a record when it comes to Crowley of unseating powerful Democratic leadership. Joe Crowley was the third most powerful Democrat in the party at the point when she unseated him. The idea that she could unseat Chuck Schumer is not an impossibility. And so I would say that this is something that is possibly going to bite him in the ass down the line, because people are not buying the fact that he was a no vote and he didn't provide them cover, and that all these people broke rank and file with no leadership repercussions. So I would say that Chuck Schumer, one of the effects of this, he's going to be taking a lot of flack, and the calls for new leadership in the Democratic Party, especially from the House, continue to grow and get louder and louder and louder. And whether that new Democratic leadership in the Senate is going to be Chris Murphy or it's going to be someone else, it's going to go down the rank of seniority like it tends to do in the party, I do not know. But the fact of the matter is that more and more people who are in elected office want new leadership, and now the majority of Democrats themselves want new leadership, as well as definitely as well as the majority of the country, the people who have to win over to vote for Democrats, want new leadership. But should he be getting flack for this? Should Chuck Schumer be getting flack if he did do this? Was this not a smart political maneuvering? And in order to understand where this logic could have come from, we need to first put forward some of the positives that came from this engagement for the Democrats. First positive is that Democrats took a stand for the first time. Of course, if you eventually cave at the end of that stand, that's a problem, especially if you break in a way that makes it look like your coalition is not united. So it also has a damaging image for the party. But wait 1 second. Got a message. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so that strong stand and that strong stance and that showing of a spine might be compromised by this break of rank and file at the end, but they had done some example of that. And I think the location at which they had done it on the issue of the ACA tax credit extension, on the issue of health care, was particularly intelligent. Donald Trump has said he was going to bring forward a health care plan for the better part of a decade now, and he has failed to do so. He tried to repeal Obamacare with no plan of what to repeal it. It was going to be the Wild West when it came to health insurance. It was only due to John McCain's vote against it that did not succeed. And in the many years since then, he has still not put forward a healthcare plan. So this is an area where Donald Trump doesn't have an answer. Donald Trump hasn't put forward any ideas, and Donald Trump has been promising ideas for a very long time and has been unable to deliver. So I would say this is an area where Republicans are weak. It's also an area where Americans have wanted action on the issue of affordable health care for a very long time. And on this specific function of the Affordable Care Act, when we talk about the ACA tax credit subsidies, this is something that is overwhelmingly popular. And this isn't just a question of like, names, like, when you call it Obamacare, it polls bad. When you call it Affordable Care Act, it polls good. The polling on it is 75%. 75% of Americans want to see the extension of the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act ACA subsidies. Now, some people would think, okay, is this specifically in reference to the people who are getting subsidized and the people who are getting the these market subsidized rates for their plans? No, not even necessarily them. Of course, those people care, but it's also the people who are going to have their premiums affected, even though they're not on ACA plans, not on these market plans. They could still see their premiums go up. And so I think these things together, on top of the fact that the consensus for a long time has been that the majority of Americans believe that everybody should be covered with health insurance. It's just that we don't know how to get there. And there's a wide consensus that our health insurance system is failing. It's too expensive. A lot of people slip through the cracks. A lot of people still die. A lot of people don't get affordable care. And the idea that we have so many cases of medical bankruptcy is a failure in and of itself. So this is a issue where Democrats can win, and they did win. And I do think it had some effect on the midterm elections. And now that they've kicked this can down the road, when premiums do go up, when this issue does come around again, and either Republicans have to shoot it down, which then they shoot down a popular issue, and that's a failure for them, or they don't bring it to a vote, and then they have to violate their promise, premiums go up, and they're violating a promise, not just a violated promise, but they're violating a promise to watch people's premiums go up. They're violating a promise to watch people lose access to affordable health care. They're violating a promise in the performance of a task that makes it even worse. So that's something that's not going to be fantastic for Republicans if they have to bite that bullet. There's also the problem for Republicans that a lot of their lower income voters are reliant on these plans. And so that has led to a break in their rank and file as well, where Marjorie Taylor Greene, a stalwart defender of the Trump administration, has come out and said, I want to see an ACA tax credit extension. Mind you, she didn't come out and say that Obamacare is the greatest or that the program's fantastic, but that there simply isn't really an alternative, that until there is a better system in place, she doesn't want to see not only the loss of these options to low-income people in her district, and she does have those people in her district in Georgia, but also doesn't want to see the premiums increase for other people. And so that break of the rank and file was something that we saw in part because of this, not just on the issue of the ACA tax credit extension, but also on the issue of the shutdown in and of itself, Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, being an example. So I would say that breaking the Republican rank and file, making the American people know that this is an issue of concern to them, as well as putting Republicans in the uncomfortable position of violating their promise, shooting down the idea, or adopting the idea. Like, no matter what, it's a loser. It's a loser policy-wise if they adopt the idea of what they wanted to cut in their big, beautiful bill. It's a loser if they shoot it down because it's a political loser to shoot it down because it's popular. There isn't really a way for them to maneuver out of this that is beneficial. So I do think that there are arguments as to why there are victories that have already been picked up by us making the stand in the first place. But, if it was working and if Trump himself was acknowledging that the shutdown was putting more pressure on Republicans, why not hold this out longer? Why not hold out for a stronger concession? I.e., what you were originally demanding, which was an extension of the ACA tax credits, which eventually was compromised to a position of extending the ACA tax credits for 1 year past the midterm elections. Whoever wins the midterm elections presumably would be able to have a better position in dictating policy going forward. Now, we didn't get anything close to that. All we got was a promise for a vote in the Senate. And if that is where you wanted the compromise, all you had to do was get them to commit to a vote in the House as well. Mind you, this might still end up being symbolic. If the question is like, we want to have a vote on this later so we can like force their hand to have to take an unpopular vote, then you want to do it in the House and the Senate. The odds for Democrats to take back the Senate is pretty tremendously low to nigh impossible. The odds for Democrats to take back the House is much higher. So if you can force a vote in the House where you make a bunch of Republicans in tough districts with such a tight margin take a bunch of difficult votes that are going to hurt them going into the next election, that would probably be more useful to the Democrats than a commitment for a vote in the Senate. Because then either you win a policy victory or make those people who are up for re-election in 2026 take a difficult vote. Be honest about their position. And so I think that them holding out for at least a guaranteed vote, not only in the Senate, but also in the House, should have probably been the bare minimum. Not to mention the fact that when people come forward and they ask, why did we shut down the government? I mean, we shut down the government. Then after shooting down the government, did we get the healthcare victory? Well, no, we didn't get a healthcare victory. We got a commitment for one chamber to have a vote on it in the future with no guarantee about the outcome. They're likely all vote against it anyway. Well, then some people are going to ask, why did I go without pay for 2 months? Why did my SNAP benefits get thrown in jeopardy? Why was I not able to access all these federal properties? Why did my life reasonably go down in quality during this time period? For what did we sacrifice? And on one hand, those who checked in and voted yes would bring this up as in to say, look, we don't know this is going to go anywhere, so we should end this now. But then on the other side, they would say, well, if this doesn't go anywhere, then why did we do all that for? And what's going to be a message to, Democrats and independents when Republicans say, look, don't blame us. It was the Democrats who shut it down. It was the Democrats who wanted it shut down, who didn't pass the clean CR, and then reopened the government after not getting any of their concessions. Don't blame us, blame them. What are you going to say? Because the party is going to need a response to that. And currently, they don't have one. I still think it ended up being a net benefit PR-wise due to the fact that we got to concentrate on a salient issue and had one of our first victories in that realm in a long, long time. But despite the fact that I think that that they've been able to frame this issue much better, was able to get on the front foot messaging-wise, the fringing of the base, the splitting of the base, that is not a good look for the party. Not getting a commitment for a vote in the House makes us all just seem terribly symbolic. And all those people dealt with all of that pain so we could make a public stand to message. Better make use of it. Better make use of it. Because if people are going without paychecks, it should be for a reason. So you gotta need to justify it when they ask you about it. Either way, if I was Democrats, I would have held out longer until I got a commitment for a vote in the House as well.